All right, everybody, welcome back to the Frogs of War podcast. I am Jamie Plunkett.
I am Melissa Truebosser.
And we are here celebrating a 1-0 TCU football team 45-3 victory over Duquesne. Pretty nice win overall. We're going to get into a little bit of that victory in just a minute. But Melissa, first, before we get into anything really intense, I want to ask you a question. It's a very important question.
Yes, the Cowboys are going to lose to Tom Brady tomorrow
That
night.
is okay. Now, first of all, that totally
the whole podcast
derailed
before we even
everything.
started.
We're done now. This has been
Okay,
the
it was a
Frogs
good
Road
run.
podcast. Like and subscribe. No, first of all, the Cowboys are not going to lose. They're not going to lose. They're going to beat Tampa Bay because Tom Brady is confused by the new numbers jersey system, apparently.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know.
And I can tell by his comments that he's nervous and he's setting this up to be the excuse as to why he throws like 5 interceptions on Thursday night.
Okay. Freezing takes exposed, if you're listening.
No. I'm right. I am right. I totally forgot the question that I was going to ask you now, so we're just going to go ahead and move right on into the breakdown of the TCU victory on Saturday night over Duquesne, 45-3 over the Dukes. Melissa, it's an FCS school. It's game one warm-up of the season. What can Frog fans take away from a game like this win over Duquesne?
That we're glad we're not Washington. I mean, right? Like, that's kind of the thing, is that there's scheduling these games. I know people have thoughts about that, but then there's also, you can lose these games. And TCU didn't. And in fact, they looked incredibly dominant. Before Duquesne even had a first down, I think the Frogs had 4 touchdowns on the board or something. They looked like they should look against an inferior opponent. They did what they were supposed to do. They looked professional. They looked engaged. They looked ready to play. The offense showed some great things, and Max, outside of one mistake that just kind of looked like let's see if this team is that bad interception, he looked like a quarterback that was ready to roll. So, yeah, I mean, I think that what you take away is nobody got hurt. TCU dominated from soup to nuts, and it was great to see the Carter rocking again.
Yeah, I totally agree. No injuries is the biggest thing. A win, obviously, is another big thing. That you got so many young guys playing time is really good to see, especially when you're talking about, we're going to get into this a little bit later, some depth issues maybe at cornerback, some questions about who's going to be able to play at safety. It's always good to get some experience under your belt, even if it is against an FCS school. So 1-0, a win over Duquesne. It is what it is. Like you said, we're not Washington. We didn't lose to Montana. We're not even Baylor, who struggled with Texas State, or
Don't do it. Don't bring him up. Don't release the hounds from Ames. Don't do it.
I mean, Iowa State did struggle with Northern Iowa. That is what it is. Iowa State seems to always struggle with in-state schools. They're going to get another chance this upcoming weekend. A little bit of a bigger stage to play another in-state school. We'll pick that game.
Top 10 game
It is
between
the first,
Iowa and Iowa State for game day.
It is the first Cy-Hawk matchup where both teams are ranked in the history of that matchup. And they are both top 10 and game day is going. So
it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun one out in Iowa.
I was tempted to go. I'll be completely honest with you. I was tempted to go up there for that. That scene would be absolutely nuts. But, it's 1-0. There's not, in our preview last week, we even said there's not much to say other than just get out, get healthy, get the win. And the Frogs check those boxes. So it's really nice just to know that it's 1 down and 11 to go to get to where TCU wants to go this season. And, that's pretty much the Duquesne game in a nutshell.
Yeah, completely agree. I think that's all you need to say.
So we're going to break down in just a little bit on this episode of the Frogs War podcast, Gary Patterson's midweek comments from his press conference on Tuesday. We're also going to give a pretty in-depth preview on TCU's upcoming contest against Cal at 2:30 on Saturday at the Carter. But first, I want to touch on some conference realignment stuff because some news has happened between the last episode of the podcast and this one, and some more news developed just a couple hours before we hit record on this show. And that is that the Big 12 has made some headway on expansion. They've narrowed it down to 4 candidates, and it looks like invitations are going to go out to those candidates at the end of this week, maybe by Friday. I see that the presidents of the Big 12 are all meeting on Friday to discuss extending invitations and voting on teams and that kind of thing. So the 4 teams being BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida. Melissa, when you hear those 4 schools, what kind of reaction does that elicit from you, just generally?
Well, I don't know if I can give you just a general reaction, but when I think about in context and where things could have been and where things are, I'm excited. I think it's a great football conference. I'm a little disappointed that Memphis isn't in the mix there. That probably is the one team that I felt like maybe should have been invited, but I'm super excited about Cincinnati. They're already working on a rivalry with Iowa State over who wears black uniforms, which I think is delightful. That was a little Twitter spat
It's
earlier
great.
today. I have issues with BYU in a lot of ways, but from what they bring to a conference, both in market and eyeballs, finances, and quality athletics, there's some positive there. The non-athletics related stuff is concerning, but we've been knowing, as the kids say, who BYU is. I think UCF is one of the largest universities in the country with 71,000 undergrads, a great environment. The bounce house was popping for Boise State in their opener. Like that looks like that's going to be a lot of fun. And, of course, Houston, um, maybe I would have liked to see them swapped out for Memphis at this point. Not have a lot of faith in Dana and Houston going forward, but they do bring a market. They do open up some fertile recruiting ground for some other schools. So I think the potential is outstanding with adding those 4 teams to replace Texas and Oklahoma. It's not going to be the same conference, but there were reports that they expect their media rights deal to be better than the Pac-12s when it's all said and done. And if you're telling me that these schools are going to pull down 20 plus million annually in a grant of rights, I'm going to feel pretty good about that if I'm any of those 8 remainders.
Yeah, I mean, you're not going to get the 35, 36 that you've been getting with Texas and Oklahoma, but as long as that number doesn't drop into the teens,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you're starting to talk about a very incredible financial impact on all of these remaining institutions. I think when we talk about these 4 teams, I'm very excited about Central Florida and Cincinnati and BYU. Obviously, like you said, BYU has its issues. We know what they are. I'm glad that TCU will be playing them again. I've missed that rivalry a little
Mm-hmm.
bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, you get into, all right, who should the 4th team be? They've obviously settled on Houston, the other options being probably South Florida and Memphis and Boise State. Academically, just Boise State's not there with these other universities. And athletically, tell me who the number 2 program is for Boise State behind football.
Yeah.
A lot of TCU folks who read our stuff have been commenting about how they wish Boise State gets an invite. And it's just Boise State's not going to get an invite from the Big 12 anytime. It's just not going to
Yeah.
happen because they don't have the depth of athletic program and they don't have the academic standards to get them there. It's just
Yeah.
the way it is with Boise State. With South Florida, I think if you look at Central Florida and South Florida and you say, all right, we want one. We want a presence in Florida. We want someone who's, achieved athletically. Then Central Florida obviously kind of gets the nod over South Florida there. If it's going to be Houston or Memphis, I guess it's up to the rest of the conference to say, do we want that 4th Texas school? Do we want to kind of maintain the Houston market? Or are we willing to kind of let all of South Texas go and expand a little bit more into SEC country with Memphis? I think trajectory-wise, Memphis might look like they're on the up a little bit more football and basketball-wise than Houston is, but Houston still has an insanely good basketball program. They've got
Yeah.
a head coach who knows how to recruit in the Big 12 already for football. And again, marketplace plays the biggest is the biggest factor of all of it. And
Yeah.
so, you look at Houston versus Memphis as cities, as TV sets, and Houston has way more. So it's
Yeah,
kind
no.
of where that lands.
I, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, at the end of the day, they're gonna pick the bigger city, and the better market, and the Texas school is gonna win over the Tennessee school. It just is.
Hmm.
When you're losing, kind of the flagship university in Texas. Could argue that maybe UTSA would have been a better choice, but it's neither here nor there. And Houston is a really great academic school too.
Hmm.
I would have loved Memphis basketball, but Houston basketball is no slouch by any stretch of the
No,
imagination.
definitely not.
So, yeah, I mean, I think this makes a lot of sense. What I'm interested in from here, I was reading on Twitter, and it might have been Mandel or Olson, I can't remember who, but said that there's never in history of realignment year seasons that a team has played more than 1 year as a lame duck member of a conference. And so, while Texas and Oklahoma could put a wrench into things when it comes to accelerating the addition of these two programs, more than likely, it looks like these four schools will join the conference as early as 2023, and that Texas and Oklahoma will exit that same year. I am sure that there could be something done in the current media deal by ESPN to maybe make that work a little bit, maybe a little bit less painful. The rest of the teams have absolutely no reason to bargain with Texas OU, and they shouldn't.
Mm-mm.
But there may be a way to make things make sense for everybody financially in the short term in order to expedite Texas and OU leaving and expedite these other four universities joining without there being too much in the way of sacrificing finances. So that to me is going to be the next interesting step. I think it's all but a done deal. Just what the timeline for that deal is remains to be seen.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I think, too, it's important to note that the bylaws that are currently in existence for the Big 12 say that three-quarters of the conference members have to vote to approve an invitation going out to another school. So even if Texas and Oklahoma both voted no, which they have no business or no reason to vote no
Yeah.
on expansion, even if they wanted to screw around like that, as long as the other 8 teams were all in agreement, any kind of vote on expansion would pass no matter what.
Yeah.
The,
And it
th-
seems
the
these teams are in lockstep, which is kind of impressive
Yeah, it really is.
because they have no other choice.
No, these 8 universities have really shown a united front at this point. Obviously, there's probably been some backdoor conversations, Pac-12, Big Ten, ACC, depending on which Big 12 school you're talking about. But from the bylaws perspective, getting these 4 teams into the Big 12 doesn't seem like it's going to be an issue at all. The question, like you've pointed out, is what happens with Texas and Oklahoma's exit? Is there going to be compensation there? What happens to the TV contract? All of this stuff that's really still up in the air. But what I think is, as far as I can tell, expanding, unless ESPN says we're going to renegotiate the contract, the TV contract, once you expand, there is no conference bylaw that says, all right, these teams are being added, so that means a team trying to leave is released from their grant of rights or anything like that. So these are
Yeah.
still two separate and distinct conversations that are being had. One is we're adding 4 teams. It looks like it's BYU, Cincinnati, Houston, and Central Florida. The next conversation is Texas and Oklahoma are leaving. How much are they paying us to leave early? And while they're happening concurrently, they don't necessarily, one's not essentially triggering the other one. It's not one has to happen then, or there's no if then kind of
Yeah.
situation happening here, which
Yeah.
makes it a really kind of interesting. It makes Bob Bowlesby's job really interesting because I'm sure he would love to have a 14-team conference for a couple of years,
Hmm.
and make Texas and Oklahoma play these new schools
Hmm.
a couple of times, let them get their feet wet, get paid, that kind of stuff. But it's gonna, it's just another layer to this whole conference realignment thing that makes me kind of interested to see how it all plays out.
Well, and I think too, just ultimately the thing is in light of everything that we think we know, this is the best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like the conference. I mean, look, everybody looked around and they should have. Everybody realized there's really nowhere else for us to go. Fine, like that's the reality of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, they said, "Hey, we can save this thing." And they made some quick, decisive moves to do so. Now, had they made these moves 4 years ago, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation potentially. But at the end of the day, I think they bailed enough water out of the ship to keep it floating. It might look a little bit differently, but there is absolutely an argument for this to be an autonomy conference, for this this to remain a Power Five conference, for it to remain having a guaranteed seat at the playoffs. I think that you can argue, and I'm just trying really hard to give you that beautiful segue into our next thing, and I think I'm doing a decent enough job here,
Mm-hmm.
but that you can argue that from a football perspective, this is as good or better a conference top to bottom than it's been over the past several seasons. Because let's be honest, Texas has added nothing to the table when it comes to play on the field. Oklahoma leaving has got to be exciting for the TCUs and the Oklahoma States and the Iowa States of the world. And you can argue that Cincinnati can come in day one and be relatively competitive. So you're looking at a program that might not have an elite blue chip team, but has a lot of really damn good ones. It's going to be good football. It's going to be competitive football. And it's going to be a team that comes out of it every year that can compete, I think, on a national level, at least as well as Texas and Oklahoma have.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Big 12's record in college football playoff games, and it's only Oklahoma, and they've never won, right? So it can't get any worse for the
Yeah.
Big 12 when
Yeah.
it comes to kind of that national brand of college football at the highest level. I do think that your segue was brilliant. You're teeing it up perfectly.
I'll
My
do what I
question
can.
is like if when we start to talk about all these, is the Big 12 still a Power Five conference, or what? What's going to happen with bowl tie-ins and all this other stuff? I mean, if they're saying it a Power Five, then yeah, the Big 12 is still a Power Five conference. It's whether or not they're going to go to like a Power Four
Yeah.
situation and all of these bowl realignments change. But at that same, uh, on the same kind of note, would the Sugar Bowl rather have the second best Big 12 team or the fourth best Big 10 team showing up in New Orleans? I guess those are the kinds of questions that we're going to need to start considering once the Big 12 contract ends in 2025, because after that, all bets are off, in my opinion. But the
Yeah. No,
question,
absolutely.
the question that you kind of hinted at is definitely where I want to go next. You have the new Big 12, the Pac 12, and the ACC. We'll do this in a couple different categories. We're going to start with off the field, just kind of like brand appeal.
Mhm.
Rank those three conferences first to last as far as like the brand appeal of those conferences.
This is a tough one because you've got two Los Angeles schools, and so you think in theory
Mm-hmm.
that the Pac-12 has the advantage. But as someone who lives on the West Coast in the state of California, nobody cares unless USC is competing at an elite level, which I'm talking winning the Pac-12, winning major bowl games, going to the postseason. Nobody cares about college football in this state. Even UCLA, who looks really, really good this year, I don't necessarily know that this is going to be that's going to move the needle all that much. And so I think the Pac-12 from a national perception, from an investment standpoint, is the bottom of that list. It has the potential to be better, but people haven't. This is California is a pro sports town. It just is, or a pro sports state. So to me, that's the bottom. If you look at the ACC, I think that it's that coastal elitism that doesn't value college athletics and college football specifically the same way that the Midwest and the South does. I would say the ACC probably has the edge. Probably goes ACC, New Big 12, Pac 12. But I think to me it's a little bit of a toss up.
Interesting, because I think when I think of brands, I think of Oregon as a brand, and USC, regardless of level of fan interest, thinking of kind of TV contract interest. I think of Oregon. I think of USC, UCLA,
Well, if
Cal.
you okay,
Right.
if you go blue blood,
Sure.
right? Like that's the
Yeah.
ultimate. Like, is
Hmm.
Oregon a blue blood?
I don't know what the latest standard for blue blood is. I think they're closer to blue blood than anybody in the new Big 12.
Yeah,
Um,
they're new money blue blood
I
because
mean,
as long as they
yeah,
have Phil
Phil
Knight and
Knight.
Nike,
Yeah, so I think from that kind of perspective, that kind of brand, like how big is the brand perspective of members, I would say it's Pac-12, ACC, New Big 12, and they're not far apart. But when
I
you have big
guess
brands like Clemson, or for basketball,
Florida,
Duke in
Florida
North
State.
Carolina, Florida State, You know,
if we're gonna put basketball into the mix,
well,
I
it's
think that definitely
I'm talking
changes it.
about
Yeah, yeah. If you're
overall
talking about
brand of the universities, right? And so,
yeah,
I think when you're talking from an individual brand perspective, I think the Pac-12 has the biggest brands, then the ACC, then the new Big 12. I don't think it's as far as people might make it out to be, but in the branding category, that's my order that I'm going with. I know yours is a little bit different, but
well,
if
okay,
we shift though to on-field football performance, rank those three conferences.
okay. So okay, and I think now I think I took the question your first question a different direction. I was wrong.
Gotcha. No, you're
I
good.
think yeah, I think I have to eat crow on that one because yeah, there's really not an elite brand in the Big 12 without Texas and Oklahoma. That's the argument, right? That
Right, right.
yeah. Okay, but if you go for strictly on the field football only performance, I mean the Pac-12's last and it's not close.
Mm-hmm. I would
I
agree.
mean, like I said, UCLA looks like they're going to be a pretty good team. USC potentially. I mean, we haven't really seen them tested much, but they obviously are good. But outside of that, is there another team in that conference that concerns you if you have to play them?
I mean,
I mean, no,
I
not
guess you'd say Oregon, but
Oregon
who
almost
knows?
lost their opener. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know what they are. Stanford looked awful. Washington looked awful. California lost their opener. I mean,
Arizona
neither the
lost.
Arizona,
Yeah,
Utah. I mean, maybe Colorado didn't look particularly good. Yeah, it's ugly. The ACC, if Clemson is taking a small step back, I mean, Miami got torched, and mind you, it was Bama, so whatever. But um,
here's a.
Virginia Tech, I guess, was impressive.
I guess this is kind of a side question. Who has the most impressive ACC win after week one?
Virginia Tech.
And what's the second most impressive team? Is it Florida State's loss?
I think it's probably still Clemson because they played an elite team close. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I think if you're competing with Clemson, then you're probably looking at them and going, "This is more vulnerable than they've looked in the last half decade, right?" But Florida State, yeah, I guess. But Notre Dame, no one's more criminally overrated annually other than Texas and Notre Dame. They're the
This is
same
fair.
program in different states. So those, yeah. But look, if you were telling me that TC was going to play Clemson or Florida State next week, I'm more concerned if they're playing Clemson.
Well, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I can agree with that. I can agree with that.
So, but yeah, but if you look at the new Big 12, I mean, if you're Texas Tech, maybe Houston's garbage, but that's still a solid win on the road. Kansas State took it to a Pac-12 team and could have been worse than it was. Iowa State, we know they'll be better than they are. Oklahoma State, we know they'll be better than they are. Um, there's not really an impressive win, I guess, amongst the Big 12, but I'd still say, if you match them up um, game to game, then I'm probably more excited about the Big 12's future than the Pac 12's future this season.
Yeah, I think I'm there. I think when you include Cincinnati in the conversation, as good as they've been the last couple of years, obviously a top 10 team right now. Iowa State is a top 10 team right now. Of those three conferences, there's only one that has multiple teams in the top 10. And so for me, on the field football performance right now, it would probably go new Big 12, ACC, Pac 12, far, far, far
Yeah.
behind the other
Yeah.
two.
I completely agree.
And then the third category is kind of everything else. Whether you want to talk about basketball, non-revenue sports, location, all this other kind of stuff. Just what is best about all of the kind of miscellaneous stuff from these conferences, and how would you rank them that way?
I think ACC is first. I
Okay.
think that they have more elite academic institutions. Pac-12 is probably close in that regard. But I think if Stanford is when you talk about non-revenue sports, they're the best annually, except for last year when Texas won, but they'd won like 30 something Champions Cups or something like that. But just as far as football just really weighs them down. I think that the new Big 12 has a chance to be second if you include basketball, which is going to be super fun and super elite, and you include baseball, which continues to be excellent. But I think the ACC, if you added basketball, if you add in locations, and if you add in just the academics, I think that's enough to carry them over some of the non-revenue sports. I think the Big 12 barely well, if you put location into it, the Pac-12 runs away with it. But if that's not the only factor, then I think the Big 12 probably edges out the Pac-12 for second place, and the Pac is last again.
Interesting. Yeah, I think basketball wise, it's ACC, Big 12, Pac 12. I think non revenue sports wise, um, probably ACC, Pac 12, Big 12. Other than baseball. I mean, if we want to make baseball its own category, then I would say Big 12,
Yeah,
ACC, Pac 12. Because even without Texas in the mix, you still have three teams that are pretty much capable in a year of reaching the College World Series in Oklahoma State, Texas
yeah,
Tech, and TCU. You
yeah.
talk about Baylor maybe on the come up again. West Virginia is always kind of in the mix. Kansas State looked decent this last year as well. It's a really really strong sport for the Big 12. Cincinnati baseball is decent. Houston baseball is fine. BYU hasn't ever, or Central Florida, I don't think have ever made any noise in
Yeah.
baseball. But I would say kind of overall miscellaneous category though, probably ACC, Pac-12, Big 12 in that regard. But if we're separating out basketball, then that shifts, and same with
Yeah.
baseball as well.
Well, if you base it on locations, the Big 12 is so far last.
What are you talking
It's
about?
Pac-12, ACC, Big 12 for sure, without
Man,
question.
Manhattan, Kansas is great.
It's almost like Manhattan Beach or Manhattan,
True.
New York.
Mm-hmm.
They all have a Manhattan.
Oh man, I don't know what's going on there. We're going to take a quick break, though, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get into Gary Patterson's press conference comments from the middle of this week and our Cal preview. All right. Hashtag ad is complete. Melissa, Gary met with the media again on Tuesday, as is his custom during the football season. And it was a pretty tame press conference, save for really two kind of items of business. The first one being right after the Duquesne game, Patterson mentioned three players, Noah Daniels, Deshaun McQuinn, and Terrell Cooper, as all kind of leaning towards being available for Cal. And as of Tuesday now, there was no update on Noah Daniels and Deshaun McQuinn, a cornerback and a safety. How much does that non-update concern you going into
I
this Cal
am
game?
so concerned about Noah Daniels.
Okay.
I feel like all we've done is talk about how worried we are that he's not going to play, and all he's done is not play. I was encouraged to see him on the sideline Saturday night. That means that he's not been separated from the team, that he's
Mm-hmm.
not in the type of trouble that keeps him off away from the team, and
Right.
that's good. If he was really raising hell, then Gary Patterson would not let him on the sideline. Period.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen that in the past, right? We know that. So I think that Deshaun McQueen's obviously like a super talented player, but there's depth at safety. If he's out longer than anticipated, I'm not worried about that yet. I'd like to get him back, but I don't necessarily think that that's hurting us. But the depth of cornerback is so concerning. And God bless CJ Caesar, did not play particularly well Saturday night. The fortunes for this team with Noah Daniels and Travius Hodges Tomlinson starting 10 games is very different than the fortunes for this team with THT and CJ Caesar starting, 12 games. So, and if there's an injury, I just think that unit is really, really toast. I think that with Keontae Jenkins and Donovan Collins backing up Caesar, I don't know if Patterson trusts either of them to get the majority of the snaps. But when you look ahead to SMU and Texas and going forward, there's not another guy on this roster that I would feel super confident lining up opposite Tomlinson for significant snaps against those offenses. Getting Keon Stewart back would be huge, so that there's some true competition between him and Caesar. But right now, I just kind of want to know what's going on. And when I
Mm-hmm.
want to know how much I should be thinking about what the future is for Noah Daniels, or if we just need to drop it and move on, because we've seen these things drag out for weeks and months and entire seasons before.
Yeah, we have, and that's my concern at this point, is that we're just not going to get updates until November, December,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden he's graduated and it's a non-story again. We've gotten a lot of comments on the website saying, hey, why don't you guys figure out what's going on with Noah Daniels? And yeah, we're trying. But when a situation like this arises, Not many people are willing to talk about it, and rightfully so from a TCU perspective. You want to keep all that information in house. And I personally cannot blame them for that. We're doing our best over here, but that is what it is. And I agree with you on the concern. I said it, I think, in our group chat the other day. I am worried about the state of this secondary if Noah Daniels isn't playing by the time we get to the SMU game. I am very concerned about the passing abilities of SMU and Texas. Obviously, Oklahoma is a downfield threat. Iowa State can throw the ball a little bit. Oklahoma State's offense is based on throwing the ball. Baylor's offense is based on throwing the ball. Like, this is going to be a long season if Noah Daniels isn't on the field. And it feels weird to say that about one specific player, but I think that it just kind of that's the case simply because of what I perceive and what you perceive as a pretty big talent gap between Noah Daniels and the guys behind him on the depth chart. Things aren't. I agree with your sentiment of TCU season looks very different if Noah Daniels doesn't play. I
Yeah,
fully agree with that.
yeah, and it's not that one guy. We've seen this before. Is that TCU has an elite player that misses the entire season for one reason or another, and people are like, well, there's enough to cover. To me, this was the only position where I felt like losing a starter they could cost us 3 wins.
Mm-hmm.
And losing a player of Noah's caliber, if we lost a safety or a defensive lineman or really anywhere else, I think there's enough talent behind him, but we just haven't seen the next guy step up
Mm-hmm.
across from Tomlinson. And if that doesn't happen, then that becomes a very, very concerning thing for TCU.
Yeah, I totally agree. On the positive side of updates, though, Patterson did say that Terrell Cooper and Wes Harris and two other offensive linemen were back and practicing and are expected to play in the Cal game. So that is some good news on the trenches front. You had Coy McMillan playing in place of Wes Harris at right guard against Duquesne. You want your number ones moving forward, though, and so Wes being healthy is a good thing. Terrell Cooper being back at defensive tackle is also going to be huge for defensive line depth, even though Earl Barquette and Corey Bethley seem to be the number ones on the inside of the line for the Frogs right now. All things lines considered seem to be in pretty good shape right now, don't you think?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's hard to take a whole lot from an FCS game, but the offensive line looked like they were controlling the line of scrimmage all night, and that's what they should do. But getting Wes Harris back, if he stays healthy this season, I get really excited about the potential of this line.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Obina Easy is everything we hoped he would be, not just from a player, but from a leadership standpoint and just a knowledge of how to play football at that level. Like, the kid is legit, and he adds a huge, huge presence to that line, both physically and I think in the mental part of the game. I was encouraged by Coy McMillan's play. I know he struggled at center, but he looks like he's a pretty solid guard. And so I don't know if it'll be him or John. I'm assuming that Wes Harris will take John Lanza's spot, and not Coy's. But Steve Avila was I think the Remington award-winning player of the week. He graded out the highest in both pass pro and run blocking of any center in the country last week. So if you're telling me that you're going to anchor that line with Coy McMillan, who's played a lot of football, and Steve Avila, who has looked outstanding, and Obina Easy, who's been great, and then you're going to throw a guy like Harris in the mix too. 4 of the 5 spots I feel really, really good about, and I think that 5th spot will be just fine. So yeah, I'm excited. And the defensive line, and I've seen a lot of people say, well, we didn't see him get a lot of sacks, he didn't get a lot of pressure, but as you and I talked about after the game today, that there's a good shot that was Gary to say we've already knocked out 2 quarterbacks and not necessarily needing to knock a guy down to get their point across.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We didn't see much diversity from TCU's defense in the second half. It's not that they weren't trying. It's just that let's get our base defenses nailed down. Let's make sure that we know where we're going and who we're covering in these situations, especially when you've got a lot of backups in the game. That's a really good opportunity just to get them comfortable with your base.
Play the
and
lanes.
just do what you got to do. Get the simple calls in. Make sure that they're doing the play, making smart plays, getting where they need to be, that kind of stuff. You don't need to get as complex as you would with an Oklahoma when you're playing Duquesne. You just don't. That being said, though, things do take a step forward as far as competition goes for TCU. This upcoming Saturday at 2:30 in the Carter, they are hosting Cal Berkeley, UC Berkeley, the Golden Bears, for a Cheez-It Bowl 2.0, if you will.
Yes.
You can watch the full Cheez-It Bowl, I believe, at Frogs War YouTube channel. So if you want to do that, go for it. Relive that magic. Melissa, Cal is 0-1. They lost to Nevada in week 1, 22-17. We've heard multiple times from Gary Patterson at this point that Cal's defense is really good. This might be the best defense TCU faces all year. He says stuff like that relatively frequently. You've done your Cal research. You've written a quick look on Cal already this week. Tell me, what can TCU fans expect from Cal on Saturday?
I'm really, really excited to see one area, and that is Cal's defensive front against the TCU running game. And I think Max gave us just a little bit of information, insight into the plan. It might have been you that asked him about not running the ball a whole lot about Duquesne, and what was he going to do this season? Is the plan to keep him from having to do that more often? But he said it's going to totally depend on what the defense is doing. As the defense is keying on the running backs, and that might open up opportunities for me. And I think Saturday is one of those games. They're going to look on film and they're going to see these 4 running backs each bringing a different skill set to the table, and probably look to slow down Zach Evans and company. And so that might open up some lanes for Max. I do expect them to have 5 to 7 designed runs, or at least some what's the word? This is the thing I talk about.
Options,
like a zone read,
zone reads,
an
that
option.
kind of stuff.
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. Those really complicated terms in college football that we don't use that very often. So you can understand why I couldn't pull that one out. So yeah, I think there could be a lot of those opportunities. I really want to see what this defensive front does against Chase Garbers and an offensive line that struggled against Nevada too. I think that's going to be really interesting. Garbers is approaching, I think I wrote my Q&A with Cal that he's approaching Perry Ellis territory insofar as he feels like he's been at Cal forever playing quarterback. And he has. It's like his 5th season. So I think he was on the team for the Cheez-It Bowl. He might be the last man standing from that game on either team, or maybe Corey Bethley was
Corey
there
Bethley.
too, right?
I went back and I rewatched the Cheez-It Bowl yesterday, and Corey Bethley was in the mix, stirring things up, alongside Ben Banigou, who I miss.
So good. Miss him so much. Mm-hmm. So that to me is going to be just a lot of fun. Those are the 2 things is what does Cal's defensive line do against the offensive line and the running game of TCU, and what does TCU's defensive line and linebacking core do against an offensive line that cut some good runs loose, but Chase Garber's not a mobile dude, and I have a feeling that we're going to hear O'Shawn Mathis look really frustrated a lot Saturday night at not being able to eat somebody. I think our man is going to feast Saturday afternoon in Fort Worth.
I hope so. I think the heat is going to be a big factor too for this Cal team. I know that we say that a lot for teams that come to Texas, and it's like, oh, the heat's going to be a factor and blah, blah, blah. It seems kind of like a stereotype at this point, but when you see what happened to Duquesne for a night game, guys were cramping up. A lot of guys went down with injury. Their head coach said that the heat played a major factor. TCU has been practicing in this August and September heat all summer long, all fall camp, and it's supposed to be really, really hot on Saturday. And I wonder how much that impacts, especially Cal's front 7 on defense. Those big guys got to rotate a lot when it's hot out, especially along the defensive line. So I think we're going to see Cal's line depth tested on Saturday. And if that's the case and their depth doesn't hold up, then I feel really, really good about TCU's offensive chances in this game of putting up some good numbers. On the other 100%. Side of the ball, that Cal team only put up 17 points against Nevada. I don't think they're a very potent offense. And, TCU's defense, regardless of whether or not Noah Daniels is playing, has enough dudes, I think, to really limit what the Bears are capable of doing.
You need a cough assist there, bud?
Thank you. I didn't hurt. I didn't feel like I needed to cough. Just all of a sudden I sounded like a frog. So that was good. Go Frogs.
Frogs.
Go
Really, you're
Frogs.
really taking this deep.
I'm fully transforming into a human frog because my fandom for TCU runs so deep.
That is that serious? Yeah, I get it. But yeah, no, I think you're right. I think this is a kind of impotent offense for Cal. They're not known for their offense, never really have been outside of Marshawn Lynch years, but and a little bit of a was it Davis, the Texas Tech quarterback that had one good season for them. But otherwise,
isn't that where Aaron Rodgers went to college too?
It is where Aaron Rodgers went to college. So 15, 17 years ago, Cal had a pretty good quarterback.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm not too worried about what they're going to do on offense, especially if the TCU defense plays like it is. And frankly, I think Gary Patterson is way overselling this defense too. They're good. They're solid. They can be effective. They scheme well. They're well coached. They're fundamentally sound. They're not going to shut down the TCU offense unless things go really, really wrong for Max Duggan in the offensive line.
That's good to know. That's good to hear. I do think TCU comes away with the win, and I don't think it's necessarily close on Saturday afternoon.
No, I agree.
The difference between this and the Cheez-It Bowl in 2018 is that our fourth-string quarterback is going to be firmly planted on the bench.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a huge difference, I think.
There will not be anyone taking a snap with drop foot.
It's true.
We hope.
At least we hope. You know, you never know what can happen between now and Saturday. But only health and goodness for TCU. Please, Jesus. So going into this Cal game, tell me give me one offensive player, one defensive player that you think are going to be kind of key to this victory for TCU.
Oh, it's Zach Evans. I think that, again, this defense is decent and stout against the run, but I think that Zach is really going to need to open things up for the Frogs. He had some nice runs. He looked like he was being unleashed and uncaged, but at the end of the day, he didn't have a huge yards per carry average. It looks like they were really holding him back. He didn't need to do a lot, so he didn't do a lot. I think that was kind of by design. Playing against this Cal defense, I think that they're going to open things up. I think we're going to see a lot of Zach. I think he starts and he gets the bulk of the carries, and I think he has 100 yards even against this really, really good Cal defense. The only thing that will stop him from doing that is that it's going to be hard to keep Kendre Miller off the field. He was the most impressive running back by a long shot on Saturday night, and the thing I like about him is he runs cocky. Zach Evans does not run cocky. Zach Evans runs efficient, does his job, walks over to the sideline. Kendre Miller wants the smoke. And you kind of like having a dude like that on your team. He has that attitude about him that you kind of want in your skill position players. And I think that's good. He's going to get more carries than we expect because it's just hard to sit him down. He's too good. He's too talented. He's too pissed off most of the time. So I think that 1-2 punch is a lot of fun, and I'm excited about it. So, but I think it needs to start with Zach and go from there.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's hard to keep Kendre off the field. I also, Patterson mentioned right after the game Saturday night and again on Tuesday that snap count was really important for Evans and Kendre Miller on Saturday. And he was glad that neither of them got run too much. When you talk about the first afternoon game of the season against much stiffer competition, a team that in Cal that's really known for their run defense, I totally agree that I think it would be foolish to say that Zach Evans is going to get 95% of the carries. I think it's going to be more like 60 to 40 Evans to Miller, with maybe a little Foster and maybe a little DeMercado sprinkled in, because I think at this point it's probably still DeMercado that is the best pass blocking running back on the team. And that's something that he has done religiously and incredibly well since he stepped foot on campus in 2018. So, but I think it starts, like you said, starts with Zach and kind of works its way down. For me, I think the key player is CJ Caesar. When you talk about an offense that has struggled like Cal, and you talk about a defense like TCU's, it's very stout, tends to, and we see this year after year after year, give up a big play here and there. And we know that just on Saturday night against Duquesne, Caesar bit down really hard on an out and up, pretty simple route, double move route. That was the largest play from a yardage perspective for Duquesne all night. Cal looks at that and says, if we can take advantage of that maybe 2 or 3 times, and then, we get in the end zone twice, let our defense do its work. I think it's really, really important, especially if Noah Daniels doesn't play. It's really important for CJ Caesar to take a step forward in his game from week 1 of this season. We've seen him play really well. He played incredibly well the last 3 games of the 2020 season. It wasn't the best competition in the world, but he stepped up and he did well. I think he had 3 interceptions in the last 3 games of the year last year. So we know that he's capable. We know that he's produced on the field before. It's time this Saturday. No more screwing around.
Yeah.
Let's lock it in.
Yeah. No, I think that's a great call too, for sure.
Absolutely. Let's get into some predictions. We've got the other Big 12 games, and then I picked 2 national games for us to pick this week as well. Let's jump in with Kansas traveling to number 17 Coastal Carolina, fresh off of their field storming for their win over South Dakota.
I am so glad they stormed the field because it might be their one win of the year. Listen, if Kansas goes in and beats Coastal Carolina at Coastal,
give Lance Leopold a contract extension immediately.
Give him a contract extension. But I think Coastal gets the job done. That's a solid program that needs to really make a statement. Beating up on even a bad Power 5 team does that. So, yeah, I think Coastal rolls in that one by 2 scores or more.
Yeah, I think it's probably somewhere around like 35-10. Like, I don't think Kansas is going to have much hope in this game. Next up, Oklahoma State hosts Tulsa. A Tulsa team that I believe lost to Northern Illinois. UC Davis. Even worse.
Yeah, UC Davis, not known for their football team.
Known for math, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes
baseball.
Brewery
science.
Ooh, nice.
Really into brewery science, yeah.
Awesome.
And baseball only for bad things recently. But yeah, Oof. I think Tulsa's bad. Oklahoma State gets Spencer Sanders and co back. They will recover from their ugly game last weekend and put together a statement win that reminds people that this is a team that's still probably a top 4, maybe top 5 team in the Big 12.
I totally agree. Spencer Sanders not playing. Shane Illingworth did well against Missouri State. He managed the game. I mean, he threw for like 300 yards. Some of that was meaningless yardage. But, when you week 1 with your backup quarterback, just get the win, right? Doesn't really matter. Just get the win. And Oklahoma State did that. Now they get Sanders back. I think they're going to really start clicking against an overwhelmed Tulsa team on Saturday. Arguably the biggest game in the Big 12 this Saturday is a game we've already mentioned. It's the Cy-Hawk game between Iowa State and Iowa. It is the first time that both teams have been ranked going into this rivalry matchup, and it is also the first time that both teams have been ranked in the top 10 going into this rivalry matchup, with Iowa State at 9 and Iowa at 10. Who wins this football game?
I think Iowa
does Levi need to mute right now?
I think Iowa is so overrated, but also they are the number 10 team in the country for some reason. Iowa State has to win this game. I mean, they have to. Like, no excuses. They have to win this game. I think they eke out a really close one. I think it's entertaining. I think it comes down to something crazy at the end because these games always do. But if you are going to be the number 9 team in the country, you're going to host game day at your home stadium. You're going to play your biggest rival. You better freaking win this game. I don't know if Levi will survive the whole weekend. We hope that he does. I got a running diary of his drinks last weekend, so I can't wait to see if that continues this season. I'm going to go with my heart and say Iowa State ekes out a close one, but I'd be terrified if I was a Cyclone fan right now.
Taking in all of the information that we have from week 1, Iowa State's struggles with Northern Iowa, they win thanks to, I believe, a late turnover, 16-10. Iowa plays Indiana, handles them. It wasn't really that close. I mean, Iowa laid the hammer down on Indiana in week 1. I feel like all of the momentum favors the Hawkeyes. They're going in to Ames. Game day is going to be there. Iowa State fans are going to be so
Wrong.
deep underwater of Busch Light. They are going to be in an ocean of Busch Light.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like one of those things where all of the momentum on paper leans towards Iowa State. Like, all right, we want to bounce back from a bad week 1 performance. We're still a top 10 team. We've got game day at home against our rival. They're a top 10 team. Let's go out and let's kick their ass. Iowa State also hasn't beaten Iowa since 2014. Let's break that streak. All this other stuff. It feels like on paper, like if it were a movie, it would play out where Iowa State wins this football game. I am very nervous about Iowa State in this game. I want Iowa State to win. I will be cheering for Iowa State on Saturday. I do think Iowa ends up winning this football game, like 24-21. It's gonna, like you said, it's gonna be close. It's gonna come down to something last minute. I hope that I have to eat crow next podcast because we've lost or because Iowa State won. And if Iowa State wins, we can bring Levi on and he can rub it in my face.
Yeah.
But I do think Iowa comes away with the win on Saturday. Next up, we will see. I hope I'm wrong. Next up, another vaunted matchup between West Virginia and Long Island. The Sharks.
Long Island has a football team?
So here's a fun fact about
idea.
Long Island. LIU, the Sharks, used to have 2 campuses. They had the Long Island campus, that is their main campus, that was Division I sports, and then they had a second campus that was called, I believe it was called, hang on, I'm scrolling. I had this note up and then I changed my page. CW Post was like a branch of Long Island University, and they played Division II sports. Recently, they combined both campuses, both universities, and all of the athletic department to only play Division I. So if you look at the West Virginia game on the Yahoo app, like I did, you see that they're playing someone named CW Post. It sounds like a poet.
Amazing.
But they are playing Long Island University. They're 0-1 after their close loss to Maryland, but I think they get 1-0, or they get the win super easy here.
Good for Long Island that they have a football team. Sad for them, they're going to lose on Saturday.
Yeah, they're getting a paycheck. That is what it is. Next up is number 15 Texas at Arkansas. Texas looked really impressive against the Raging Cajuns. This is an opportunity to beat a future bunkmate in the SEC. How do you think Texas does against Arkansas on Saturday?
I don't care what they say about how good Arkansas looked last week, and they're bad.
Okay.
This is a bad football team with a bad quarterback. I think Texas rolls again and again. We're just going to see them build themselves up into being a top 15 team heading into October, because that's what Texas does. So, yeah, Texas is going to continue to look good for the next couple of weeks.
Arkansas with the upset. You heard it here first. Kansas State against Southern Illinois.
Kansas State looks solid. I don't think they're great, but I think they're going to win a lot of games, and they're going to beat teams they're supposed to beat. Southern Illinois is a team they're supposed to beat.
I agree. I think that Kansas State gets that win, moves to 2-0. I think Baylor takes the win over Texas Southern as well. And then let's go Texas Tech, Stephen F. Austin.
Yeah, I think the Red Raiders win. They do enough things well.
Nice. 2 national games. Pick them really quickly. Ohio State, Oregon. Who you have?
I think Ohio State's a better team than Oregon. I don't know if I think Oregon is that good, though they do have some elite talent. I think the Buckeyes probably pull away late for a double-digit win.
This game is in the shoe, and that makes all the difference, I think. I think Ohio State wins. And then a game that TCU fans should keep an eye on because it's a fun former Mountain West Conference rivalry, the what's it called, the Religious War or something like that, the Holy War, BYU against Utah, BYU hosting that as well. Who do you have?
I think that Utah is probably a little bit better right now. BYU played an entertaining game and beat an Arizona team that's not very good, kind of close. So I think Utah has the edge, but I think it'll be a really fun game for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And with that, this has been the Frogs War podcast. You can like and leave a comment and a review on Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you listen to a podcast, anywhere you consume your Aural Media, pardon me. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, where we are posting the full games for TCU football this year. You can see the full TCU Duquesne game on our YouTube page right now, and obviously on
Last I think it might have
frogsword.com.
gotten taken down, but
Oh, it's up
we'll
there.
try it again.
I checked it
Okay,
today.
good.
It's still up
Good.
there. I had to re-upload the right version.
There we
So
go.
there we go. And then obviously all of the good stuff on frogsword.com, written by our excellent writing staff. And with that, we're looking forward to TCU beating Cal on Saturday afternoon at the Carter. I am Jamie Plunkett.
I'm Melissa Treewasser.
Go Frogs.
Go Frogs.